Hello, everyone. Welcome to Canon News. Today we have a very special guest, Councillor Swanson. She has worked to get governments to reduce and end poverty for more than 40 years, and she has also been awarded Order of Canada in 2017. She's the author of the book Poorbashing, the Politics of Exclusion. For the last 12 years, she volunteered at Carnegie Community Action Project, working for more and better housing, higher welfare rates, and stopping gentrification in Vancouver downtown Eastside. In 2018 August, Councillor Swanson also spent 4 days in jail for blocking access to Kinder Morgan pipeline. So she has done some amazing work for our community, for our city, and she's currently city councillor. So welcome, Jean Swanson. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Great. So I'll start with first question about your book, The Poorbashing. I think you wrote that book in 2001, am I right?
Yeah, it's about 20 years old now.
Yeah, 20 years old now. So do you think that book is still relevant, or have you seen some progress or changes in the society?
It's absolutely relevant. There's a lot of discrimination and hatred that's directed at people because they're poor. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, there's a lot of hatred and discrimination that's directed at people because of racism and discrimination based on gender and things like that too. And so if you get somebody that's in several of those categories, things can be really, really bad. And in my definition, poorbashing isn't just when you direct it at an individual person, hatred or dislike. It can also be, you can have a poorbashing law. Like, for example, the welfare rates is $760 a month for a single person. To me, that's a poorbashing law because you can't live on $760 a month.
Exactly. But what about people who, do food drives and donation and giving them clothes and all those things, which people from the left do it? And I was reading reviews about your book, and I didn't get the chance to read it, but I will. So how do you think left can improve in terms of their treatment of poor or fighting for their rights?
Well, there's nothing wrong with collecting, giving food and giving clothes and stuff to people who are poor. I do it. Mm-hmm. But it has to be done in a spirit of solidarity, not in a spirit of, here, take what's good for you, or beggars can't be choosers. But I say it's also important when you're doing that to work for the systemic change that will make it so it's not necessary to do that. So yes, take stuff down to Strathcona Park for the people who are homeless, or take stuff to the Downtown Eastside Women's Center, or to the Muslim Care Center, or any of those groups that help people. But also work, like right now, the provincial budget is coming. And it's a really, really good time to put pressure on the provincial government to increase welfare rates so that people won't have to depend on charity.
Mm-hmm. So let's say I have a question. If you get $1 billion for a city, how do you like to spend it? What are your top priorities for the city?
So the city has a lot of things that it just has to do, like run the libraries, keep the pipes from breaking, keep the sewer fixed. So all of these things take up, probably 95% of the budget, if not more. But if I had extra money, I'd use it to end homelessness. Yeah, but to get housing for people, yeah.
Yeah, housing is such a big issue right now. And people like me who are millennials and young people, we were hoping, actually, I think the only silver lining, we hoped that the houses prices will come down. But yeah, it has actually increased way more than our imagination. So what
Yeah,
do
it's
you think is
ridiculous.
hope for us, for people like me who have jobs, who have businesses, who are earning not so much, but not so bad either, but we cannot think of affording a house in city?
I know it's really bad. Um, I'm thinking that we need to really change our approach around homes so that we try and get a lot more housing out of the market, so that it's housing that doesn't make a profit for anybody. Like, I live in a co-op.
Mhm.
I've lived here for about 30 years, and the mortgage for the co-op is paid off. It's an old co-op. And so all of our rent just goes into, like, I got a new fridge last year, and new roofs and fixing the pipes. But because we don't have to have a profit, it's a really nice way to live. And there's a lot of security. And I'm hoping that we can get more and more non-market housing. Back in the 70s, the federal government used to build or contribute, all governments in Canada contributed to about 30,000 units of social housing a year, new units.
Mhm.
Now it's more like a tenth of that. And so if we could get that back up to the way it was in the 70s, I think we could have a lot more housing security. And then if we had more non-market housing, it would reduce the demand on the regular housing, and I think the prices could come down.
I was actually talking to one of the politicians last year, and I was talking to her about, that prices should come down. And her logic was that Vancouver city people have actually become wealthier due to price increase. And it's
Mhm.
actually, they're become more prosperous. So it's actually good. If the prices go down, then these people will lose money. This is maybe their retirement income or their savings, and that just I didn't know how to answer that. How do you answer this kind of logic?
We had a big debate on that last night at City Hall about a rezoning proposal,
Hmm.
where we had developers coming and saying, oh, you can't have this rezoning because it will lower our property values. And then you had tenants coming and saying, we have to have this because it will protect us from being evicted, and it will lower prices so housing will be cheaper.
Hmm.
And it was a really good debate, and some of the people, especially, of course, from my perspective, the renters, were really, really eloquent. Um, yeah, but I mean, the reason people can't afford housing is mostly because land prices are so high. So if we can do things to lower the price of land, that should bring down the price of housing a little bit. But I still think that the main thing we can do is try and get governments to develop more and more nice non-market housing. Yeah.
Hmm. But do you think those non-market housing would be would families be able to live in them, like family of
Yeah.
three? Or...
Have you ever heard of Vienna? In
Yeah, yeah,
Vienna,
I've
there's
been there
something
once.
like 60% of the housing is non-market housing. And so almost everybody lives in it, and it's really nice. It has like libraries in it, and childcare and swimming pools, and it's well maintained, and it's just what people accept. And I think, there's no reason why we couldn't have something like that here. So that way, if land values go up, the increased value is kept in the public domain to benefit the public rather than to just benefit a developer or somebody like that.
Hmm. What are your thoughts about foreigners investing in British Columbia, in Vancouver? People who don't have a resident status here. Some people I know, they haven't even put a foot in British Columbia, but they have properties and investment. What do you feel about that?
I don't think it's so much the nationality of the investors as the fact that they're using housing, which should be a human right, as a way to basically extract money.
Yes.
Um, so I think if we could have some laws, and like I think the province is working on a law where would have to actually be identified if you have a piece of property. I think that's a good first step, right? That you could attach a name to a piece of property rather than a number or a bunch of letters and a number. And then if we could have a bigger taxes on property when it's sold, I think that would help. And yeah, there's a lot of things like that.
So what's your message for someone young who is about to leave Vancouver? Do you have something to say to them because it's just so unaffordable?
Well, good luck. Would be one thing. And I'm sorry. And I'm going to try and work to make housing more affordable here. And I know a lot of other people are too. I guess that's about all I could say. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We know that you're working really hard for all of us. And I hope more and more politicians think like you. But do you have any plans to involve residents of the city to be more involved in decision makings?
I think the best kind of involvement is the kind where residents organize themselves and get together to put pressure on in a certain way. Like an example would be the Vancouver Tenants Union. They organized a lot of people to come and speak last night at City Hall about this motion that would protect tenants, some tenants a little bit. And they've organized for other motions to protect tenants, like for the tenant protection policy, which gives tenants who are rent-evicted a little bit more money when they get rent-evicted. It's not good enough. And they've organized for an improvement on that policy, and they get people up there, and they have workshops before the council meetings to help people understand what the issue is and kind of guide them through the process of what it's like, either writing to council or coming to speak at council, so they won't be intimidated. And yeah, I think that kind of involvement is really, really good. People have come up to council too about single room occupancy hotels and the fact that we need vacancy control, vacancy control is when landlords can't raise the rents as much as they like when a tenant leaves. We have a rent freeze now until December, but if a tenant leaves, there's no rent freeze. The rent can go sky high. So what's happening in all apartments in Vancouver, actually, but really badly in the SRO hotels in the downtown Eastside, is that whenever somebody leaves, the rents can get jacked up double or triple what they were. And so we basically lose that unit for a low-income person, and it contributes to homelessness, right? So we've been asking the province to change that, and they may, but in the meantime, these folks have been asking the city to do it if the province won't. So the city is supposed to be looking at that and coming back with a report in the spring, and we'll see what happens. So that's another way, a lot of people, like 75 people, sign up to speak, and puts a lot of pressure on council so they know that it's really important.
So usually these speaking schedules, or when the people show up, is it in weekdays or on weekends so that more people can come? Because that's really, I think, the number one problem. People don't have time.
I know. Look, it's really bad. It's really bad figuring out when you're going to speak. Sometimes it's never on the weekend. Sometimes it's in the evening. But the problem is that you never know when your turn is going to be until like 10 minutes before it's your turn. But now, because of COVID, one of the positive things about COVID is we're doing it all by phone. You don't have to come to City Hall, so you can just put your phone in your pocket, and the clerk will notify you when she thinks it's about half an hour before it's your turn, so you can listen to what's happening, and then you can have your turn when it comes up. So it's a little bit easier now if you've got the technology and if you're comfortable with it, but it's still a pain. It's still a pain, but sometimes it can be fascinating. Like last night, it was very interesting debate. with all the developers coming and saying, oh, we want to keep our property values high, and all the tenants coming and saying we need protection.
So what do you think should be the priority of politicians to work for poor and homeless people, or help protect property assets of people who have made some money?
Yes. Yeah, so
looks like they're doing the second thing right now.
yeah, so, well, I don't know how this vote is going to come out on this motion, which is really a very little simple thing. It won't really protect a lot of tenants, just about 3,000. And it won't give them a lot of protection, just a little bit. But I think, for me, protecting tenants is one of my top priorities. Getting housing for homeless people is a top priority. Climate change is a huge priority.
Yes.
And another thing that we desperately need is a way that one of the reasons the city has so many problems is because the federal government and the provincial government aren't doing their jobs. Like, the province is creating poverty by having welfare and disability rates so low. And the province is creating homelessness by not building enough housing. The feds are creating homelessness by not building enough housing and by not supporting lower income people that much. So then the city comes along and has to do it, but the only tax the city has is property tax, which is a regressive tax.
Yeah.
You have to pay the same rate if you're a Chip Wilson in a $70 million mansion, or if you have a $400,000 condo. And the city doesn't have the ability to have a fair tax. So one of the things that we desperately need, which is a priority of mine, which I campaigned on, is a progressive tax. We called it in my campaign a mansion tax. Mm-hmm. So if you have a mansion that's worth over $10 million, you'd pay more tax than if you don't have a big house. So that's another priority for me, is a fair tax system for the city, dealing with homelessness and renters' rights, and more housing for lower income people, and climate change, doing our part to prevent a climate disaster.
So what is the message from you to young people? How can they make a difference? How can they put pressure on governments to work and pass those laws?
Well, there's lots of things you can do to get involved. Like, there's people out blocking there's a park in Burnaby, I think, where there's a bunch of trees that are being cut down for the Trans Mountain Pipeline. There's people out there protesting all week long. You can go out there at UBC. They have a social justice center. Mm-hmm. Those guys are great. If there's a good cause, they manage to get hundreds of letters to city council and speakers. And if you have something like that, a social justice center at your university, maybe you could get involved, or you could join a tenants group. There's several of them, or help out with some of the downtown Eastside groups that are pushing for things like vacancy control and SROs. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just pick something that suits your fancy.
Yes, exactly. And what do you think about transportation situation in the city right now? Do you think we have enough transit, or we need to have more cars or public things?
So I've been pushing, I've got a couple motions passed to try and push for free transit for low-income people and children, although I actually think transit should be free for everybody. The city doesn't really control it, it's TransLink, but it's just an advocacy motion to try and put pressure on another level of government. There is a pilot project now because of those motions that's has actually given people transit passes, and they're going to check out, I guess, whether or not that helps them. I don't think we need a study to find out that it will help them, but so yeah, I think we need better public transit. Of course, COVID is making that more difficult because people are afraid of all the contact, but hopefully we'll get shots pretty soon, and that won't be so big of a problem. And yeah, it would be good if we could reduce car use a lot. And the city is working on that. And we had an emergency climate plan passed a while back, and I got some amendments to it to try and make sure that as the ways of reducing pollution are rolled out, that low-income people aren't adversely impacted. So every report that they give us is supposed to tell us how it will impact people who are making under 50,000. And hopefully if it won't hurt people who are making under that, and it'll take into account the needs of people who are handicapped and people, seniors, people that can't get around too easily. So yeah, and so if we can move to electric cars and have more public transit, more biking, more walking. Another thing the city is working on is having complete communities, which would be like designing each neighborhood so that it has what's needed and you could just walk to it. You know, the medical, the food, the school, the community center, all within walking distance.
Okay, great. Now,
Yes.
coming back to the question, which is a little controversial right now, but I think it's important because it affects Vancouver city people and especially South Asian Indian communities. So I heard that there was a motion against a farm bill which was passed in India, and I heard that it's a foreign policy thing, and most of the city councillors were not very educated about it. They didn't have enough knowledge. So how did you decide that you should bring that motion, and who were the people who came up to you for that?
The Imtiaz Papat from the Coalition Against Bigotry was the first one that came to me with it, and Gurpreet Singh and the Khalsa Diwan Society, and Aman Singh, the MLA from Richmond. They all talked to me about it and helped me write it. And so I wrote a motion, and it's just a simple advocacy motion that we asked the mayor to write to the province and the feds to support the right of Indian citizens to have free expression and liberty. And so anyway, I may, and also to ask them to speak out against these laws about the farmers, which would take away the minimum price supports that they're receiving for their agricultural products. These laws are, I think the farmers are really afraid that they're going to undermine their livelihood and that they'll all be unemployed or not able to feed their families. And they're so afraid of it that millions and millions of them have been demonstrating in India. And I've actually heard that it could be the biggest demonstration ever in the world.
No,
so,
I want to clarify some things. Like, I don't want to be super respectful to you. And I really, I'm really grateful that you gave me this time. But people who you took time, like who you are speaking about, like people like Gurpreet Singh, I know, and Khalsa Diwan Society. So they don't have actually a good track record. They have a record of working against Indian government and laws. And for example, they provided you misinformation about minimum support price. Now the government has put that in writing time and again in December, in February, that it will not go away. It will not go away. In fact, what they did was they even make a direct bank transfer, like how we are doing CERB, like government is putting directly into people's account. So they even did that, which means that they will get even more money. Now what happens is middlemen who is making money out of poor farmers, they are very powerful and influential people. So they can arrange these protests and things like that. So I'm not saying that all farmers are pro this, but I'm just saying like these people, they don't have good track record, like the name you just took, especially Gurpreet Singh. I know him, I follow him, and Khalsa Diwan Society. So they have been involved with some really bigoted things against the Hindus and against Indian government in past, and also related to terrorism in past. So how do you did you fact check it, like this, especially this MSP thing? This is completely not true at all.
So, oh, well, I did, yes, I did quite a bit of Googling, yeah, and I don't know
I
about
can give you the
your,
document.
I don't know about these people being involved in terrorism. I don't think that's
No,
true.
no, no. I'm not saying terrorism. I'm saying like they have been, I would say, a separatist movement, Khalistan, and I don't expect you to know everything. But in 80s and 90s, thousands of Indians died because of that. And that movement have been banned by Canadian government and governments all across the world. But these people still talk about it, even though they know that this ideology, this thing has killed thousands of people in past. So basically, they have a vendetta and against government of India about people. Like, they know that something will create problems. For example, I'll tell you why I'm talking about this thing is that because a lot of people who are not against these laws or who support Indian government, because India is a really big country and we believe in freedom of speech and people can have different thoughts and views. So they have been attacked in city of Vancouver, in city of Burnaby, in Calgary. Jagmeet Singh's brother-in-law and his sister-in-law were caught, abusing people who were, doing a car rally in support of a vaccine program between India and Canada. So these kind of things like really concern us, that no one is talking about the bigotry done by these groups. Like they're forcing people to think like that. Like there are some people who are pro farmer laws, there are some people who are against it. But that doesn't mean that you can propagate hate against them and you can, attack them.
Yeah, so I'm not hating anybody. The resolution as it stands is basically to stand in solidarity with the farmers and ask the government to support their right to expression and liberty. So
Yeah, that is completely fine. Even
yeah.
Canadian Prime Minister said the same thing, that he believes in right to peaceful protest and everything. And in fact, it is a hypocrisy of some people, because Canadian government actually blocked India in World Trade Organization for those subsidies because they are hurting environment and affecting climate in a negative way. So these laws were actually, I hope, you can read about it and have some documents from, not from some, propaganda website from the government, which has, made some clarifications in that. Because these laws, I believe, that are good for climate and good for really poor people, like who commit suicide and who have problems with middlemen. They don't get money directly for their crops, but now the government have made it digital, and the money will be directly coming into their accounts for minimum support prices. So I know that you are getting late. You have another meeting to attend, but thank you so much for talking to us. And
okay. Yeah, you're welcome.
And
Bye-bye.
for fighting for us.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.